Morning Year 12, hope everyone is okay and you've been doing really well with all of the work that you've been submitting via Show My Homework. I've been massively impressed with how well you've been doing in your assessment tasks, showing me that you are understanding the work that you're learning on your own at home. So first of all, I just want to say a massive well done, and I'm really enjoying being able to keep in contact with you and communicate back and give you the grades and stuff on the tasks. So please keep that up. Before I move on to the next LO, there's a little bit to explain about the next LO because there's a slight confusion with the learning outcomes list that you've got. But I'm going to explain that in a minute. But Nathan has sent me a message this morning just to double check the lesson beforehand, which was looking at the clinical characteristics of depression and organising them into emotional, behavioural and cognitive characteristics. So before we move on to the new lesson, what I'd like to do is just go through them and just allow you to assess your own responses. I want to make sure that you haven't put the symptoms in the wrong categories. So remember, when we're talking about behavioural, emotional and cognitive, we're talking about how will it make you feel for emotional, how will it make you act for behavioural, and how will it make you think for cognitive. And when we talk about a clinical characteristic of a psychological illness, we are referring to a symptom of that disorder. So I'm going to go quickly just across and I'm going to categorise them and you can tick off that you've got them in the right place. So the first one is anger. Although sufferers tend to suffer more negative emotions and fewer positive ones during episodes of depression, negative emotions are not just about sadness. Sufferers of depression can often experience anger, which they feel towards themselves or others. That would definitely be an emotional characteristic. So it's a feeling. You can feel angry, so it's how it makes you feel. Absolutist thinking, the yellow one going across. Most situations are not all good or all bad, but when a sufferer is depressed, they may not be able to think in these terms. It's black and white, there's no grey area, it's completely bad or it's completely not. So that's definitely a thought process that will come under cognitive. Aggression and self-harm. So anger is the emotion, the aggressive behaviour that comes from anger is the act or the behaviour, okay? So aggression and self-harm, aggressive behaviour towards others or themselves would be behavioural. Dwelling on the negative. Dwelling is a nice piece of vocabulary that we could add to our books. I'm trying to get a definition for you. It will be tier 2. You can dwell. It's given me the definition of house dwelling, which is the wrong type of dwelling. It basically means, although I can't get a very good definition at the minute, it's to spend, I've got one. Okay, sorry. It's to spend a lot of time thinking or talking about something unpleasant. So tier 2 vocabulary, the word dwelling, to spend a lot of time thinking or talking about something that is negative. Going back to our clinical characteristics of depression, people dwell on negative aspects of situations, so they spend a lot of time thinking about it. So that would be a cognitive symptom. Disruption to sleep and eating. They will either eat too much, eat too little, not sleep at all, or sleep too much. You've got two types of sleeping, hypersomnia and insomnia. Hypersomnia is increased sleeping behaviour and insomnia is difficulty with sleeping and reduced sleeping patterns. So that would be behavioural, something that you would do. Lowered self-esteem. They can feel quite sorry, my emails keep going on. Lowered self-esteem. Sufferers of depression tend to report low self-esteem. In other words, they like themselves less than usual. This can be quite extreme with a sense of self-loathing, for example, hating themselves. That's a feeling. Okay, so that would be emotional. Poor concentration, difficulty concentrating on tasks would be cognitive. Lowered mood would be obviously emotional. They feel sad. That's the main symptom of depression, having a feeling of sadness or low mood. And then reduced activity, just generally they're just a bit apathetic or lethargic. Again, good vocabulary that you can use in your responses. Basically they just don't really do much. They're quite lethargic, quite tired all the times. So just to make it clear, absolutist thinking, poor concentration and dwelling on the negative are your cognitive. Absolutist thinking, dwelling on the negative and poor concentration or the cognitive. The emotional ones are anger, low mood, and low self-esteem. And your behavioural ones are sleeping and eating patterns, aggression and self-harm, and reduced activity. So just like we did for phobias, you'll have 9 in total, 3 for each category. Can you double check you've got them in the right place for me, please, and make any changes that you need to make. Okay, so right, so let me just explain now what the problem is with the learning outcomes list. If you look at your learning outcomes list, when I put it together, I've separated out your 2 cognitive explanations of depression. Now, if you remember when I went through this with you, when I was describing how this unit would work, we look at each illness from a different approach. So when we looked at phobias, we were looking at it from a behavioural perspective. We're looking at we're looking at depression from a cognitive perspective. We could, if we wanted to, look at depression from a behaviourist perspective and look at positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement and how that can lead to the illness. But the specification wants you to look at illnesses from different approaches. When we move on to OCD, we're going to look at it from a biological perspective. And what you'll see is how the different approaches tend to explain psychological illnesses in different ways. However, each approach has an explanation for each illness, if that makes sense. So when we did phobias, we looked at it from a behavioural approach. Now we're doing depression, we're looking at it from a cognitive approach. Going to your list, your learning outcomes list, I'm just going to get it up on my computer. When I've written your list and put your list together, your 2, I'm just opening it now. Right, so your 2 LOs are LO10, describe and evaluate Beck's cognitive triad explanation of depression, and LO11, describe and evaluate Ellis's ABC model of depression. Now, they're both cognitive explanations of depression, but if you look in your pack, you've got your AO1, and then the evaluation applies to both. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So what you're going to have is you're going to have LO10, Beck's negative triad. Then you're going to have LO11, Ellis's ABC model, and then you're going to have LO10/11, the evaluation for both together. Okay? Really, I should have split this over 3 different LOs, but I haven't. Sorry about that. So, LO10 is just going to be describing Beck's cognitive triad. Then you're going to have LO11, which is just going to be describing Ellis's ABC model. And then you're going to have LO10-11 part 2, which is the evaluation for both of those explanations. I think in this video I'll go over the AO1, the LO10 and AO11 because they're quite short and straightforward. And then I'll put together a video on the AO3 for both of those together. Hopefully that makes sense. I know I've spent quite a bit of time going over stuff before I move on, but I just wanted to make it really clear. If you do have any questions, just message me through Show My Homework. Right, okay, so I am going to need my whiteboard to help explain this. Now, Aaron Beck is the name of the psychologist who's quite famous, really, in this area of psychology, and his theories on what causes depression have been quite influential. Okay, so he's the big wig in this area of psychology, looking at depression. And what we know is that people who are depressed basically think very differently to people who are not depressed. The way a non-depressed person would think about any kind of situation, the way they would think about any kind of event, the way they would think about themselves is very different to the way a depressed person would think about them. And Beck was the first person to put together a theory which talked about the differences in thought processes. Remember, the word cognitive refers to thought processes. Okay, so this is an example of a cognitive explanation of depression. Okay, focusing on the way people think. Okay, so Beck said that there are 2 different faulty thought processes or faulty cognitions. Okay, the first one is information processing. Okay, when you receive information, your brain or your mind processes that information in the correct way. So, for instance, you could look at 2 people having a conversation. That's the information that you've received from your environment, and your brain processes that information for you. No problem, that's fine. However, the the person who's got depression won't process that information in the right way. It will be faulty. They will make mistakes. They will make errors, and that will cause them to think differently about things. So one of the reasons why depressed people think differently is because they don't process the information from the environment in the same way as a non-depressed person, and that's called faulty information processing. What we do know is that they will focus, when they're processing information, they will only focus on the negative aspects of a situation and not the positives. So let me give you the example about the two people having a conversation. Let's say I see two of my friends having a conversation about me, and I know that these two friends have made plans to go and do something together that don't involve me. The person with depression would look at that situation, and they would process that information, and they would think, they would like jump to the conclusion, or they would make the assumption that they didn't like them anymore. So if I was depressed, I might look at that and think, well, they don't like me. That's the reason why they haven't invited me out to have that, to wherever it is they're going, whatever those plans are. Now they're having a conversation. They're probably having a conversation talking about me, talking about all the things that they don't like about me and saying why I'm like a bad person. Now, obviously, that's not the right way to process that information. A non-depressed person might just think, oh, they just want to spend some time together on their own. They're probably having a conversation, making plans for the day or what they're doing. Doesn't necessarily mean anything negative about me. However, someone with depression will process that information in the wrong way. They'll make errors, they'll make mistakes, and they'll focus on they'll focus on the negatives and ignore the positives. So the first thing that you would write in an exam answer is that people with depression have faulty thought processes. One of the ways in which their thought processes are faulty is the way they process information about situations. They will process information the wrong way, which will lead to them making mistakes, creating errors, and jumping to the wrong conclusion. They only focus on the negatives and they ignore the positives. Another thing that they do is they catastrophize events. Now, this isn't on your PowerPoint slide, but I would like you to add it in, please. It's a tier 3 for psychology, catastrophizing. It's spelled CATASTROPHIZATION. Catastrophization. I think the American spelling is Z, but the English spelling might be S. Let me just Google that and make sure I'm getting that right. And you probably know what catastrophization is. You can probably figure that out. It's a faulty thought processing. Yeah, it's a Z on Google, so I think that's the right way to spell it. It basically makes a situation, or think of a situation, a lot worse than it actually is. So they catastrophize events, they blow things out of proportion, they make a mountain out of a molehill, they take the smallest thing and it's the end of the world to somebody who's depressed. They can't keep things in perspective. I would like you to add that, please, to your notes, okay? So it's not on your PowerPoint slide, but under the subheading of faulty information processing. I want you to explain about them focusing too much on the negative and ignoring the positive, and also blowing events out of proportion, making a mountain out of a molehill, and catastrophizing things. Okay, that's the first way in which their thought processes are faulty. Okay, the second way in which the processes are faulty is the schemas that they have. Now, those of you who've done GCSE psychology will remember the word schema and what it is. All of the information that you know about the world is organised into schemas. Schemas are little blocks of knowledge, and everything you know about something will be contained in that schema. Okay? Now, you build your schemas all the time. All the time that you're learning new things, you're adding to your schemas, and they're getting bigger and they're growing and they're developing all of the time. So, for instance, you will have a schema for psychology, and every lesson and every time you learn more psychology, you will be building that schema, and that schema will develop. But you have schemas about everything. You have schemas about yourself, you have schemas about your friends, you have schemas about different subjects, you have schemas about different things, like going to the cinema. Every time you do something and you learn more about that particular thing, you will add to that schema, and that schema, it all stored in your long-term memory. You've got loads of them. According to Beck, another way in which depressed people have faulty thought processes is their schemas about themselves. Their schemas about themselves are negative. So you have a schema about yourself, and everything you know about yourself exists in that schema, it's in that box. Now most people will know things that they're good about themselves, like they're a good friend, or they're a good listener, or they're good at a certain subject, or they can do a particular sport, or they look a certain way, they like a particular aspect of the physical features. But they'll also have some negative ones as well, so they might not like a particular aspect of themselves. According to Beck, people with depression have negative self-schemas. So all of their schemas and their long-term memory about themselves are just negative. There's nothing positive in there. They just don't feel very good about themselves. They don't like the way they look. They don't like the way they are. They don't like they think they can't do anything. And that's the problem. So all of the schemas relating to them as a person are negative. Okay, so let me just review the two ways in which a depressed person has faulty thought processes is firstly in terms of the way they process information. They will process information in the wrong way. They will ignore any positive aspects and only focus on the negative. And they will have the tendency to catastrophize events and situations, which will basically mean blow them out of proportion, and they can't keep things in perspective. The second way in which their thought processes are faulty, or their cognitions, another way of saying thought process is cognition. Okay, a second way in which their thought processes are faulty is their schemas about themselves. In normal, non-depressed people, schemas are about us as people are both positive and negative. However, for depressed people, they're very negative. Okay, now. Beck then went on, after he'd sort of said these are the two main reasons that people with depression have negative thoughts, to put together what he called the cognitive triad. Now, the cognitive triad said that there are three negative thought processes that depressed people have. They have negative views about the world, negative views about themselves, and negative views about the future. I'll show you a little diagram now to help you understand. Okay. So, back to front again, isn't it? Right, so here's Beck's cognitive triad, which is a triangle, meaning three different things. So you've got the sad person in the middle. This is the person who's got depression. Now the reason, according to Beck, he is depressed is because he's got negative views about the world. Everything he knows about the world is negative. The world is a bad place. Nothing good happens in the world. And nothing, there's nothing good to think about. The world is a horrible, not a good place to be in. They have negative views about themselves. They don't think they're very nice. They don't think they're very good. They don't think they can do things. And they also have negative views about the future. They don't think that anything can change or improve over time. The way things are now are permanent. Okay, and these three combination of negative thought processes put together are what Beck said cause people to become depressed. So if you got asked in the exam to talk about Beck's cognitive triad or a cognitive approach to explaining depression, you would say one approach is Beck's cognitive triad, and he said people who've got depressed think differently. Firstly, they process information in the wrong way, they focus on the negatives, they ignore the positives, and they have the tendency to catastrophize events. Also, their schemas, particularly their schemas about themselves, which are stored in the long-term memory, are predominantly negative. There's not much, they don't think very positively about themselves at all. And then this leads to the cognitive triad, with people who are depressed having three types of negative thoughts about the world, negative thoughts about the future, and negative thoughts about themselves. Okay, so if that makes sense, that's LO10, the AO1 bit for LO10. What I would like you to do is write up the notes after you've watched this video to LO10, and then also, if you see there's a little application activity that I want you to draw an example of the negative triad in your book. With a little sad person in the middle and the triangle, and write the negative views about the world, the future, and themselves. And I'd also like you to show me that you understand, and when you go back to your books, is to make note of the type of thoughts that somebody would have if they would experience this. So, for instance, a negative thought about the world would be the world is not a good place to live in. A negative thought about the future is that nothing is going to improve in the next 2 years. A negative thought about themselves is I'm not very good at this, so why would I not be good at anything else? Just you try and put a couple more in. I've given you some examples there for each one, and then you'll have a nice little triad with examples of different thought processes that people with depression will have. Okay, so I know I've spoken a lot, and this is probably the longest video we've done so far, but I am just going to move on and do the LO11 for the AO1, which is Ellis's ABC model of depression. Now, Ellis built on the work of Beck, so he believed what Beck said in terms of depressed people thinking differently to non-depressed people, but he had a slightly different theory. So although he agreed with Beck that, yeah, depressed people definitely think differently to non-depressed people, he has a slightly different approach to understanding what happens. Right, okay. So the ABC model stands for three things. A stands for the activating event. Because Beck said, sorry, getting confused, Ellis said that these thoughts have to come from something that has happened in your environment, in your life. So this could be a divorce, it could be losing your job, it could be failing an exam, it could be falling out with a friend. There is always, according to Ellis, which is quite different to Beck's theory, an activating event. Something has happened and then that triggers a process. The first thing that would happen would be the activating event. B stands for beliefs about that activating event. So the next bit that happens is the person who's got depression starts to think about, well, why has that activating event happened? And these beliefs can be like two different types. They can either be negative beliefs or positive rational beliefs. So if I take an example of failing your psychology exam, there's two ways that you could think about that activating event. The first way could be, well, I know really I didn't work very hard in that mock exam, so I'm going to try harder, I'm going to revise more, I'm going to make sure I do more past exam questions, and I'll have another go. That's the right way to think about that activating event and the reason why you failed. However, someone who's got depression won't think about it like that. They would think, well, the reason why I failed is I'm not very good, I can't do it, I'm not clever enough, and they will have negative beliefs about what caused that activating event. If you want to stretch yourself a little bit more, there are different types of beliefs that can contribute to that B part of this model, and they are identified on the slide. So if you want to push yourself, you can look at them. They are masturbation, I can't stand it-itis, and utopianism, and those beliefs can contribute to thinking negatively about the activating event. However, if you read about them and you're not quite sure, just stick to the B being the beliefs about what caused that event. Anyway, those beliefs will have consequences, which is what the C stands for. So for instance, if I believe the reason that I didn't do very well in my mock psychology test is because I didn't revise enough and I needed to work harder, then the consequence of that would be I would revise harder and try again next time. And that would hopefully lead to an improvement. However, if I believe that the reason why I didn't do very well at my psychology exam is because I'm not good enough, then I won't try harder next time. I'll probably do worse next time, and the next time I do the test, and I might end up even dropping out and giving up. So according to Ellis, the activating event leads to beliefs about that activating event, and then whatever type of belief you have, whether they are rational beliefs or irrational beliefs, they will lead to a certain set of consequences. Positive consequences, which are good and will lead to positive outcomes, or negative consequences which will contribute towards depression. So still focusing on the way we think and the things we believe and how they can lead to depression, but a slightly different explanation than Beck's. So you've got Beck's Triad and you've got Ellis's ABC model, which are both examples of cognitive explanations of depression, but they are slightly different examples. Your application activity for this, what I would like you to do as an example under your notes for LO11, is I would like you to think of an activating event. You can't use failing your psychology exam, but you could use any other activating event, like falling out with a friend. You could do losing your job or being divorced, whatever you want. Okay, so think of an activating event, and I want you to do two pathways to that activating event. So I can go just show you what I mean, so it's nice and clear. Okay, there we go. I'll show you now. Okay, so think of an activating event to go there, and you choose your own activating event. And then I want you to think about a certain set of beliefs about what caused it, like irrational and logical, and what the consequences of those beliefs would be, and how that would lead to a positive outcome and a happy person. But then I want you to do the same activating event and how that could lead to a different set of beliefs, which are irrational and negative, which could then lead to negative outcomes, negative consequences, which would lead to a depressed person. It's important to understand with this model that the same activating event can make one person depressed and not affect the other person at all. And it's all about the way the things we believe about why that event has particularly happened. Okay, so I'm coming to the end of this video. I know it's a long one, but obviously we've gone over the symptoms of depression to make sure they're right. I've explained how you're going to label out the next few LOs in your books, and I've gone across 2 in 1, which is quite a lot. But you've got LO10 the AO1 and LO11 the AO1. So you'll want 2 separate pages. LO10, explain the AO1, then a little picture of a triad with some examples of different beliefs. And then you'll have LO11, the ABC model, and then you'll have the same activating event and how that could lead to different beliefs and then different outcomes. And then what I'll do in the last video before Easter, which will go live on Friday because I don't have you on Thursdays, will be the AO3. And then I want that written off, and I'll give you an essay, I think, to do over Easter, and that will be it. When we come back and we start again over Easter, I'll upload the next set of videos, which will be looking at how would we cure depression then. If someone who's got depression thinks differently, how can we use this approach to help change the way they think, to help improve their depression. Hope that all makes sense. Any issues, please let me know. Thank you. Bye.